something from a website, and we say, well, here's the website we got it from. Somebody goes to that website and it's different than what we're saying. We can explain that, oh, well, this was on such and such a date that we downloaded this information, and that's why it's different than what you're seeing now. And that's why it's important, not when Kelly and Danielle are going to the sites and getting information, not just to write the information down, to actually download it. Because those websites can change. It's not like a book in the library you can go back and check out again, right? It's something that is transient. So downloading that information, either as a whole web page or getting the PDF, is important. And always saving original files. So if we have an original file, a data file, we save that original file in a special place and keep it safe, right? So we always have that to go back to, because if something happens to that website and we have no other way to get that information, we want to make sure that original file is pristine. And then I'm going to jump down to number 6. Whenever we start doing analysis with that file, we will save a different version of it. So that way the original stays pristine, it's got that data exactly how it existed at that point in time. And then that working file that we're working on is the one we do the analysis with. And if something, we happen to mess up or accidentally delete something we didn't mean to, or something happens and it's not in that form anymore, it's not like it's lost. We always have that original to go back to. And when we're saving it, we want to use a conceptual name. So calling it data file is accurate, right? But maybe that's not as helpful as saying CBM 004 fall of 2013. So using a conceptual name that makes sense to us and to someone else who's looking at it at another time, or even us 2 days from now when we're trying to figure out which data file we're looking at, right? That makes sense. And then saving it in a place that makes sense. So we don't have one folder that has data files for all of our work. We have a Eureka folder. And maybe inside of our Eureka folder, we have a fall of 2013 folder where our files are. And then when we get to fall of 2014, we'll have a fall of 2014 folder. And maybe in that fall of 2013 file, we've got our data file, and then we've got the catalog. So we have a folder that has all the catalog. So thinking about how you want to structure your data and organize it so you can find it later and it makes sense to you and to someone else you're working with is important. And again, anytime that we're going into an Excel spreadsheet or altering any file in any way, we want to make sure that's a working copy. So you can think of a way that might make sense for you. I learned this from computer scientists. They have their original file, and then they'll take that file, let's say it's called CBM 004. They might go underscore working, and now I know it's a working file. Or underscore working, underscore, and then the date. And then each date you work on it, you update the date. So then you've got, okay, this is the file and how much work I had done as of this date, Monday of last week, and then Wednesday of last week, and then Friday of last week. So let's say on Monday of this week I do something terrible and all my data's gone. And I'm just about ready to have a heart attack. But then I can say, oh wait, I have not only the original file, but I have the file as it existed last Friday. I can just start from there again. And that way I'm not having to recreate work. And always, always, always backing up our data. I like to call this, and I stole this from my father-in-law, the belt and suspender method. Right? Well, actually, I don't have either today. But theoretically, right, if we want our pants to stay up, we're going to have a belt that keeps our pants up. But what happens if that belt breaks? And if we need the belt to keep our pants up, our pants fall down and we're embarrassed. So if we have suspenders and a belt, if one of those breaks, we have a backup system that can save us. And probably each of us in the room, I'm guessing, has had at least one instance where something happened and our file's gone and we didn't have quite that backup. And if you haven't, that's the best lesson ever, because then you become especially aware of the importance of having a backup system. And there are all kinds of ways you can do this. You can have it on the computer, maybe if you own a computer. You can have it on a jump drive. You can store it in the cloud. You can email it to yourself. But what you want to think about is a systematic way of backing up your work so that hopefully it becomes a habit. It kind of happens in the background. You're not having to use your brain energy to remember backup, backup, backup. You're using your brain energy for this interesting work you're doing, and the backup happens automatically. Google Drive is a cloud service that's free that allows you to do that. Dropbox is another one. we could have a whole class on how to do backups and different options available. But the most important, it's not like there's one right way and the rest aren't any good. It's what works best for your process and however your workflow is and what's going to be easiest to have happen as a habit in the background instead of having to use your brain power to remember backup instead of brain power for this interesting research. So hopefully these things, maybe you're already using some of them, I bet you are. And if not, maybe you can think about implementing some habits and then doing them enough times so you don't even have to think about it. It's just what you do and help you manage your information more effectively and efficiently. Oop, did it go the wrong way? There we go. So at this point, if you have questions or comments or anything to share about what we've been working on, we'd love to hear it. That's how ideas come about. One of the ways. Yeah.
How helpful have the colleges been with giving you all the information and working with y'all to give you all the stuff y'all need?
That's a great question. Well, so it started with the coordinating board, and that took a couple emails back and forth, but that was okay. It just takes time when you're requesting information. It might be the most important thing that we're doing, but for them, it's just one other thing to get done, right? And maybe they're not so interested in sharing that information sometimes. So that worked out, but we were very lucky. That worked out fine. And then the first college we had a contact was Texas State because of that report Dr. Henschel talked about. And they were amazingly, they, within, I think, 24 hours, had a response saying we're going to handle it. Within another 24 hours, had the detailed answer that we needed. And I would say that it's not, that was a lucky thing, right? We were very fortunate that their researchers were so responsive to our work. And then gathering information from the other colleges, we've been using their websites. So we can go to the website and then find most of what we need. Because if it's the PDF of that catalog and that's the rule book, then that's what it is. We don't have to talk to a person about it. But there have been a few times when the information here wasn't clear or we couldn't find it. We had to talk to them. And I don't know, do you want to answer that, Kelly? You had contact another college, right? Or was that Danielle who did?
I think that was Danielle.
Danielle.
But, I mean, just using the online resources, it's been effective, and then we might have any problems with that.
So maybe 99% of what we needed to find, we found online, and just one or two cases we've had to make clarification with the university. Dr. Henschel, maybe you made a couple of those calls.
You know, Kelly and Danielle are doing simultaneous work, so it's interesting. They pull together information, they find the inconsistencies, so they identified these are the 4 that we needed to look for. So that was it. We had 4 universities. First, there were 4 universities that weren't on this core website, and then we started to look at these universities, and that information couldn't be found. So I guess sometimes you can, it's wonderful if you get a PDF and you just say, that's the undergraduate bulletin, the information is there. But we're seeing a shift. A lot of this is going online, so it's more like a database, which makes complete sense. So the updates are great, but for our type of work, it's messier, you know, because it's easier to have it in one file. So for some of those universities we called, and one particular, we called 2 or 3 people, and I finally got the fellow who said, you know, we don't have it out in that way. And he said the core curriculum is different for each major. And he gave us a site that we could open up and look at the degree plan for every one of their majors. So in that case, it was looking at each of those degree plans, and then we found a consistency. They all required the same 3 hours, and then the other 3 hours were major specific. I mean, and that's interesting. It's a learning process, right? So when they can, they would. And in the website, too, that really confirmed the need and the significance of this study, because that university was trying to do something there. They thought, this is a wonderful opportunity, things have changed, but we've got to pull this data together, which is just like the video. I mean, you know, what was the whole reason for the internet? You know, what was driving that? How do we organize this data? And Texas State was trying to do that, you know, but it was just so hard to get it done. So now, I think that the system in place is going to be great in uploading these, but the complexity of the change is going to be magnificent. You're going to have so many more opportunities, which as a student, I think that's really important. And for faculty too, it's exciting, right? It's not like you just have these 6 hours, you got to take this and it's done. It's, you know, your choices, you can have 20 choices, you know, and all across Texas, you know, it's not just Midwestern. So you know, how are we gonna get that information to people? So, you know, we're checking the coordinating board site every day right now, because they said this should be up like the first week of March. So like Dr. Lewis said, should we call them on Friday and say, yeah. So we're waiting, because if it were all there, how much easier our study will actually be next time. You know, we should be able to look at that one document, because since that's being submitted to the core curriculum committee, it in itself becomes this contract, like we're using with the the university bulletins or catalogs now. So that's a great question. Good question.
Did y'all aim a certain number of universities to collect core curriculum that catalogs, or y'all collected the catalogs from all the universities in Texas?
All the university from Texas. So that one screenshot, that was Danielle or Kelly's, because they look the same, because they both did this work. Inside each of those folders is the syllabus, or excuse me, the undergraduate catalog for every one of the state universities. So now they're switching over, and they're going to do it for the 50 community college districts. So it's a great archive, right? You know, we're going to have our own little database of all of these, and it's dated in a way. But going forward, that's the type of thing that you need. And like Dr. Lewis said, we've both done this type of study in our own fields, and it's interesting how many questions I will get related to this past work. Could you go back, because it's not there anymore, you know? So we want to get it out there, we want to get it published, so then it is more accessible to people too.
It helps more people. And it's all state schools, so like a private universities don't have those same requirements, and so we're not pulling information for
St. Ed's or something.
Yeah. So it's public schools. So.
Yeah, that was my question. I was about to ask if y'all were planning on putting out information for private schools.
It's such a different system, and if you've been to, you know, a private school or school outside of Texas, you go, that's apples and oranges. But you know what was interesting is it used to be apples and oranges within the state until this core came in. You know, so it's kind of baby steps. We've gotten to this point now. So at first, I think they tried to put something in place that was quite simple and standardized, and then they realized this needed to move more. But it could move more in a way that our students could still come to Midwestern and take something, and then transfer, or you know, vice versa, and you know, for it still to apply, which is so important.
And even though this is just for Texas, there are other states that are grappling with similar questions, right? So we're hoping that when we share this information, yes, it's going to be helpful for Texas, but sometimes when we read other people's research, it's those specific results that are very interesting. But sometimes what can be really helpful is how they approach that question or the problem and the methods that they use, and maybe we can borrow little parts of that for our work. And so maybe that will come in handy for some other states as well.
That's such an excellent example, because I do quite a bit with technical communication and rhetoric, professional writing. So what we see in Texas then, as you say, that's opening up that conversation that I'm going to have with my colleagues over the next year. What's happening with these type of courses in your core curriculum, in your general curriculum? So it'll be interesting to see.
Questions, comments, worries?
It's y'all are bringing in such a vast amount of data. I mean, have y'all had trouble getting it organized? I mean, I know that that's what was one of your main topics, was making sure everything was organized. I mean, that's a lot of information to bring in and categorize and organize. Are y'all putting it in Dropbox, or are y'all using Google Drive?
Do you want to speak to our methods?
We're using Excel spreadsheets, and it has been kind of difficult to organize the data, but Danielle and I both do the same work, and then we compare to make sure that we're on the same page and we're doing it right. And so I feel like that's been the greatest thing, is having someone else doing the same work as me, because I wouldn't want to do all of that alone. So that's good.
And we're really fortunate. Dr. Garrison, our writing director, our campus had an office that we use for the students that are working in the Writing Center. but they've made it available to us in the afternoon, so they can work side by side in an office and work on this, you know. And that, at first we were wondering, should they work at home and back and forth, and we just realized it's just too much. How about your saving, the saving of data? What's your process on that?
Well, we have our own jump drives that we use, and then we have
The external drive?
yeah, we have that too. So we save it double time. So in case we lose our jump drives or something doesn't open, we always have a backup. Which is
And those backups are in different locations, right? So if you had like 3 backups, that's awesome, but if they're all in the same place and there's a fire and they're all burned up or something crazy like that, then all 3 backups are gone. So they're in different locations. And then we've talked about adding to that in the future, maybe some cloud backup too, like a Google Drive.
Like we use Dropbox.
You use Dropbox?
Our research firm.
Is that working out well for
It
you?
is, it is.
Yeah.
The only thing I would caution about Google Drive, Dropbox is awesome. Google Drive does not work well with computers here on campus. They're not updated regularly, so you can like use Google Drive in the student center, but like in Bolin, it's impossible to get to them.
Oh, that's interesting to know, because I tell students that Google Drive is
Because
a great.
Google Drive's awesome, you can get it on all the computers, but most computers won't run it right.
Ah.
Well, I thought
They should, but, and I talked to one of the tech people, and he's like, well, if you call your teacher, they'll come in and update it. It's like, that's just not true. It took us like 3 years to get an overhead projector. They're just not updating the drivers or something, because you like pull up Drive, and like the sidebar will come up half, and like the top portion of it, and we can't get to work on any of the computers in like the geoscience lab or the math office computer room. It won't work there either.
Do you use is it your own Google account, or is it your
Yeah,
NSU?
it's just your Google Gmail, which is what makes it so convenient if you get it to work here.
No, is it your NSU?
You could.
Gmail,
No.
or then, you know, a standalone account, so.
I work in the registrar's office, and I can barely get any of the computers in there to do anything with Google ever.
Yeah, sometimes like the search engine itself, the Google won't work.
Well, and
Or
they
Mozilla.
won't even install any sort of Flash players, so it's a whole lot.
Yeah. I know there is a problem with the Google system.
I use Chrome.
Google Chrome is not working for some time anymore.
Right.
But download the
Depending on
detailed
what I'm
files
doing,
and
I use
stuff.
that.
Then you have to go to Firefox and
Usually
delete.
Chrome.
Because I know Firefox, the updates are hard, seem to be behind sometimes, you know, to keep emails up.
Yeah. I have problems with the general Botany students. They were taking a quiz and it wouldn't appear.
Yeah.
And I said, I know it's there. I can see it. And some students were taking the quiz. I could see, a desire to learn, but then half of the students couldn't. So finally, he said, well, use another browser, and that apparently solved the problem. He said, don't use Chrome. So I think we have those technical problems, so you be aware.
You know, we
Yeah.
really do, and that speaks to getting your system with your colleagues down early, right? Because somebody could be
Oh, yeah.
working with an old operating system, and then whatever, they can't even download the latest browser anymore, depending on what their operating system is. So this is a problem, you know, and then it's like, well, that's too many things to have to change before I can, exchange the document. But we ran into an interesting thing just today is with the PowerPoint, once the video was added, it became too large a file to share with email at Midwestern, because you can't share a very big file, So then the default was quickly shared with Google Drive, So, I mean, that's a wonderful thing, but to have those backups, how are we gonna do this, how are we gonna share this data? And then, like you said, the versioning system, on this data, so that you know which one are we picking up, which document we're picking up.
Versioning's huge.
Yeah.
How you're gonna work with that. And then with both of these, with all these, with different systems, sometimes there are ways that on whatever computer, if it's your personal computer you're using, you can set up a folder so that whatever's saved there automatically goes to Dropbox or automatically goes to Google Drive and automatically gets updated if you install the software correctly. And so that's kind of nice, so you're not having to, okay, it's Friday at 3:30, I must do my backup, or it's today, every day at 3:30 I have to do the backup. It just kind of happens in the background. But then you need to put a little reminder to go check it every once in a while, make sure it's still working.
I need to know how to do that, because I don't know how to do that. The automatic, backup. I don't have that. But I want to add something about data, and this is mainly for students that are in sciences. And you said something very true, you know, you have to document the process, everything that you do, even if you breathe or stop breathing. And when you are doing an experiment, and in sciences we have you know, an old-fashioned technique called lab notebook. And everything that you are doing, because sometimes you are conducting an experiment and you don't have the computer right there to, you know, type quickly, you know, so you have to have your lab notebook and write down all the observations, you know, right there. And then after, you can go to the computer and, you know, put them in a system that you have. But that lab notebook, when you are in the lab, you should have that, because you don't have, you know, cannot do it, you know, type and do the experiment at the same time. So be cognizant of that. But everything, sometimes, even if it appears insignificant, all this happen, and record it anyway. If it's insignificant, you will find out later that it's insignificant. But at that particular moment, if you think, oh, this is insignificant, go back and say, well, I don't know that for real. Write it down. You know.
Better safe, right?
Very safe, because I have been in that situation, so I know what. So no, and then I couldn't. Oh God, that's what it was, and I cannot remember it. So if I, you know, if you write it down, it's gonna be there. Sorry. Write it down is good. It's still, you know, that is a good method, as good as or better than the computer. Unless your dog eats your lab manual, so then.
You know, that's so true, because the notes that Kelly, the observations that Kelly and Danielle have written have been so important to us,
right,
and have changed the focus
yes,
of what we're collecting. Like, you know, because they're being so accurate, so careful. So, for example, this one university had quite a different listing for communication core, depending on whether or not you were taking a course that was maybe just for honor students, or students whose original language was in English. That was so specific that we really don't have a place for that in that study. We had to think about it. They still collected the data, we put the note,
right,
and then we had to decide, you know, in the scope of this
right,
study, maybe not, but at least we've got that note, because that in itself could be an interesting study.
exactly.
You know,
yeah,
that's exciting, and that's hard, you know, kind of rail, you know, you've got to bring it in, bring it in, but those little notes.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have happened without it, yeah. Very, very
Notes
careful,
are
thorough,
good.
they were.
Yeah. So.
Yes.
That's been really helpful, because I kind of forget everything that I've done in previous weeks, and so to like look back and see all that we've done, you know,
Yeah.
it's a good reminder.
I don't know if you guys heard what Kelly said first. She said the weekly is what she does. It's really helpful. You want to tell what the weekly is?
Every Friday we just document like what we've accomplished for that week, what we learned, and if we have any questions, and then I just write it on the same document and send it to my mentors, and they give me feedback or answer the questions that I have. So
That is.
that's the way that we document what we've done.
Another idea we stole from someone else, right? So we don't have to recreate the wheel all the time. We take good ideas and borrow and share.
Yeah. I'm gonna keep that in mind. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm gonna keep that in mind with my own mentees. Those weekly meetings. Yeah, we are all. Yeah, we are all out of time. Well, thank you so.
Thank you very much.
And I think this is the last.